After moving into our newly built house and finishing the unpacking, another moving truck suddenly parked in front of our home. Then my husband dropped a bombshell.
Starting today, my parents will also live with us.
Huh?
If you oppose this, divorce is the answer.
I burst into laughter and quipped. Well, we might as well be divorced already, right?
Huh?
This incident occurred right after we moved into our new home, and I had already left my husband and in-laws behind. I am Olivia, in my 30s. I married my husband, Michael, 5 years ago, and our son, Liam, is now 4 years old. Initially, I quit my job when we got married, but when our son turned 4, I decided to return to work. I now work full-time on weekdays. When I first met my husband, he was kind, laid back, and perhaps a bit oblivious at times. Back then, I thought these traits were just part of his personality. Above all, I was drawn to the fact that he always put me first, which led us to get married. However, I later realized that my compatibility with my in-laws was far from ideal. They seemed more concerned with appearances than genuinely considering others. Their thinking was one-sided and self-centered. The first sign of trouble came during wedding preparations. They insisted on having a grand wedding because my husband was the eldest son in the family. I preferred a modest celebration with close friends and family, but they argued that such a wedding would be embarrassing and not fitting for their family background. Ironically, my husband's family wasn't particularly well off. My father-in-law was a retired office worker, and mother-in-law was a homemaker. Their house wasn't large either, they had been renting all along. Yet, they insisted on putting up a facade. In the end, they said they'd cover the whole expenses, and without consulting me, they booked a lavish venue. To avoid conflict, I went along with their wishes and had an extravagant reception. However, the result was that only the groom's side covered the costs. Ultimately, my family ended up paying for the bride's side. Even during childbirth, it was the same. When I was enduring labor pains at the hospital, my mother-in-law arrived and immediately said,
"What? The baby isn't born yet? You said you were having contractions, so I came all the way here." Ugh, how boring.
She proceeded to engage in trivial small talk endlessly by my bedside. Of course, I was in too much pain to pay attention, but she persisted, saying,
"Hey, Olivia, are you listening?"
My husband, on the other hand, just stood there without uttering a word. Before we got married, I appreciated his laid-back nature, but now it feels less like laid-back and more like obliviousness. Well, perhaps he simply assumes that his parents' way of thinking is the norm. And after childbirth, the inconsiderate behavior of my mother-in-law and father-in-law continued. Despite it being shortly after giving birth, they stayed late at our house, making noise under the guise of celebrating. My father-in-law even demanded,
"Hey, prepare some snacks."
When our son cried, no one bothered to comfort him. Given this situation, I found myself disliking my in-laws and tried to limit our interactions to the bare minimum. However, a certain incident led me to become more deeply involved with them. We, as a family of 3, were living in a rental apartment. However, as our son grew older, we began considering purchasing a newly built house. Yet, the process of building a house involves various meetings, from land selection to working with construction companies and interior design. Since my husband and I both work, it was challenging to schedule meetings during weekdays. As a result, we always arranged these meetings for weekends. However, having our son present during lengthy discussions was difficult, so we often relied on my parents, who lived nearby, to take care of him. One day, we had a meeting scheduled for the next day, but my mother informed me that she had caught a cold and didn't want to risk passing it to our son. Now, I was torn between canceling the meeting or taking our son along. That's when my husband suggested.
Why not leave him with my parents occasionally?
Personally, I wasn't keen on relying too much on my in-laws. However, without considering my opinion, my husband picked up the phone and started making arrangements.
Hey, it's me. Sorry for the sudden request, but could you take care of Liam tomorrow? I'll bring some souvenirs as well.
I feel bad about this sudden change.
It's fine.
But my oblivious husband simply said, and hung up. At that moment, I had a vague sense of foreboding. On the day of our meeting, I took our son to my in-laws' house in the morning and then proceeded to the scheduled appointment. On our way back, I brought my in-laws their favorite sweets as a gift. I was eager to head home, but as expected, I got caught in a conversation trap.
Hey, you're building a house, right? What kind of house is it?
A built-in kitchen. Ha! Young people these days. It'll make your life easier, won't it?
My husband unintentionally blurted out.
Olivia is handling all the kitchen details.
My mother-in-law glanced at me and said,
Well, I'd love to try out a beautiful kitchen too.
So, with a smile, I suggested, why not consider remodeling your kitchen, too? To which she retorted,
We don't have that kind of money. Rather, I wish you would remodel for me as a way of showing filial piety.
Ignoring my discomfort, my husband casually added,
When our house is finished, you can come see it. You're welcome to use it.
Personally, I dreaded the idea of others using my kitchen. And so, the interrogation about our new house continued until we were finally released 2 hours later. On our way home, feeling uneasy, I asked my husband, Hey, your parents seem overly concerned about our house. But we're not actually living together, right? His response was matter of fact.
It's our family home. I said the kitchen is your domain, didn't I?
So, I believed him. From that day on, my in-laws began offering to take care of our son during our meetings. While I appreciated their help, they always managed to meddle in our home affairs afterward.
Show me the blueprints.
He started asking questions like,
How spacious is the bathroom?
or,
What's the size of the guest room?
he even offered unsolicited advice about the future, saying,
You should install handrails in the entrance for peace of mind during old age.
My mother-in-law chimed in, suggesting,
Wouldn't a living room be more comfortable here?
or,
What's the height of the kitchen counter?
when I tell her the height, she said,
Oh, that would be inconvenient for me. You should make it a bit lower.
I couldn't help but reply. I adjusted it to the height that is comfortable for me. But my father-in-law interjected,
It's not just you who'll use it. Michael will live here too, so you need to consider everyone's comfort.
Everyone? We're not designing the house to accommodate occasional visitors. Desperate for support, I looked at my husband, but he remained silent, accepting their words without objection. Whose house are we building, anyway? Because of these repeated exchanges, I grew exhausted. So, I consulted my husband, saying, Can we stop leaving Liam with your parents? It's also frustrating that they keep interfering with our new house plans. However, my husband dismissed my concerns, saying,
Having them take care of Liam is helpful. Just tolerate their nagging a bit. You're my wife, after all.
But your parents are imposing their opinions too much. It's as if they think they'll be living here. Surely we're not considering cohabitation? In a half-exasperated tone, my husband snapped.
I said we'd live as a family. didn't I? Stop being so persistent. If you keep complaining, we'll get a divorce. Divorce.
What on earth was he saying? It was my in-laws who suddenly intruded into our new house plans. Yet somehow, our conversations always veered toward divorce. Since that day, my husband's threats of divorce increased with every issue that arose. On another day, after a meeting, my in-laws visited our home and began discussing our new house. My father-in-law suggested,
Hey, shouldn't we change the location of the bathroom?
Yes, maybe it's better to move it over here. Should we ask the design firm for changes?
Even my husband seemed ready to make a phone call. Feeling cornered, I asserted, we've already made decisions. In response, my father-in-law grew angry.
Who do you think you are? You know nothing about house matters. Listen to the opinions of your elders.
Exactly. We're advising you for your own good.
Rather than coming to my aid, my husband casually said,
Yeah, let's consider their advice.
It seems I'm stuck in a whirlwind of opinions. Then my father-in-law looked at me and said,
Hey, Michael, couldn't you have married someone more understanding?
Dad, don't say that. Come on, Olivia, apologize. Otherwise, we'll get a divorce.
It left me dumbfounded. I thought, enough is enough. Despite my efforts to avoid interactions with my in-laws due to our incompatible personalities, we've been seeing them more frequently lately. Unfortunately, my husband has become increasingly aligned with his parents, leaving me with no ally. The kind Michael I once knew has vanished, replaced by a puppet manipulated by my in-laws. When we decided to build our new house, I was excited about our future life together. But now, meetings are torture, and conversations with my in-laws feel like hell. Yet, if I dare confide in my husband, he responds with threats of divorce. Once, half-jokingly or perhaps seriously, he even handed me a pre-filled divorce form, saying,
Your attitude toward my parents is unbearable. They're offering advice, and they take good care of Liam. If your behavior doesn't improve, I'll seriously divorce you.
I was left speechless. It's clear that he'll always side with his parents, no matter what. Moreover, my husband claims that my in-laws take good care of our son, but that's only during our meetings. The ones who genuinely look after our son are my own parents. They've been there for sudden nursery school emergencies and difficult times. When I fell ill, they'd come over to care for our son. My parents even prepare gifts for birthdays and Christmas. In contrast, my in-laws have never given our son anything. Instead, when they visit, they demand,
Bring us a souvenir.
My husband doesn't understand any of this. Feeling worn out, I finally visited my parents' home. Clearly, I looked exhausted, and my mother asked in concern,
What's wrong?
So, I mustered the courage to share my current situation. To my relief, my mother said,
If anything happens, you can always come back here.
It was a comforting response. Yes, I don't need to force myself into that family any longer. I just need to make a decision. But we have our son, and we're building a new house. However, given the current situation, it feels like my in-laws might eventually take over our new home. If that happens, I'll be subjected to their verbal abuse for life, all while being taken advantage of by them. I can't bear that. Yet, if I bring up divorce now, my husband will likely reject the idea. Despite his constant talk of divorce, my husband and in-laws are concerned about appearances, so divorcing him won't be straightforward. That's when I had an idea. And so, I began preparing for the worst. Finally, our newly built house is complete, and today my husband, our son, and I came for a viewing. Our son is happily running around, exclaiming,
"Yay! Our new home."
"The house smells fresh, and I'm thrilled that my ideal home has finally become a reality." We had a brief meeting with my husband to discuss moving in, and we decided that the second floor would have a guest room and our son's room. However, since we don't plan to use it immediately, I thought we'd just use it as a place to store our belongings for now. I mentioned this to my husband, but he simply said,
Make sure to organize the stuff properly.
Despite my casual response, I already felt suspicious about my husband's behavior. On moving day, we transported our belongings as planned and began unpacking. Since I expected a busy day, our son is staying with my parents. Suddenly, I noticed my husband was nowhere to be found. Searching for him, I saw him on the phone. He was saying things like,
What? You're already coming? We're not done unpacking yet.
At that moment, I thought, oh, are my in-laws coming again? But soon after, a moving truck pulled up in front of our house. I wondered if the mover had forgotten something. Just then, the doorbell rang. I answered the intercom, and there stood my in-laws. To my surprise, my in-laws arrived with their belongings in tow. My father-in-law barged in, demanding,
Hey, is everything sorted?
Oh dear, nothing is organized at all. Olivia alone won't cut it.
Behind them stood a mover, clutching protective covers typically used during relocation. The mover politely asked,
Hello, may we begin our work?
Work? What work? I wondered. But my in-laws instructed the mover.
Go ahead.
And then suddenly, our home was invaded by workers. I confronted my husband, asking, What's going on? He nonchalantly replied,
Oh, we're starting cohabitation today. You know, they've been looking after our son, and it'll be easier for us all to live together.
Huh? We never discussed this. I protested. My husband continued.
Well, I'm the head of this household, and my parents have been advising us about this house. Besides, Mom wants to live here too.
His casual tone infuriated me. What? This is our family's home for the three of us, right? There's no room for your parents.
I'll take the largest room on the second floor.
And the one next to it will be mine.
She added.
I measured it recently. Do the curtains fit?
I couldn't believe it. They were already claiming rooms in our new house. Measurements? When was that? I asked my husband. Hey, could it be that your parents have been here before? Isn't this their first time seeing the house?
Huh? They actually came the day before we did the house tour.
What? Why?
They wanted to see it, so I gave them the keys to take a look ahead of time.
Unbelievable. My in-laws had explored the house before we even moved in. They even decided on their own room and took measurements. I felt anger welling up deep inside me. Hey, why didn't you consult with me? Isn't this our home for the three of us? Besides, Liam's room will be gone.
Ha! He won't use that room right away. And the guest room is for when someone visits, right? So it's fine if my parents use it. Besides, I said it before, this new house is for the whole family to live in. And when we say family, that includes my parents.
Wait. Did you deceive me?
You're just misunderstanding. I'm the homeowner, so stop complaining.
As my husband and I engaged in this exchange, my in-laws joined the fray.
What's wrong with you? Are you against us living here? How insolent for a daughter-in-law!
Such an unfilial daughter-in-law. It's only natural for children to care for their parents. You're part of our family now, so you should take care of us.
But that's not the point. Originally, this house was meant for our family of 3 to live in. Even the kitchen was designed with me in mind.
Well, isn't that fine? After all, you'll be handling household chores in this house, won't you?
As a daughter-in-law, isn't it natural to take care of the household?
Then does that mean you won't do any housework?
Of course not! It's only natural for a daughter-in-law to take care of household matters. Michael, if she keeps opposing us like this, get a divorce!
Don't talk back to my parents. I'm serious about getting a divorce.
Certainly, that line finally came up. So, you're thinking of divorce, right?
Huh?
My husband responded with a puzzle. I couldn't help but burst into laughter. I faced him and said, "We might as well be divorced already." My husband and in-laws had a look of shock on their faces. Although I haven't submitted it yet, so it's just on paper, I handed him the divorce papers.
Huh?
It was a fully filled out divorce form. He looked at it and stammered.
What's this?
I reminded him. Remember how you've been threatening me with "we'll get a divorce" all the time? Well, there you go. I've filled it out too.
Oh, that was just a joke.
You've been threatening me daily with divorce. How can that be a joke?
We're married, aren't we? A joke like that should be fine.
It would be fine if it were a funny joke. But how can threats like that be taken as a joke? Besides, I have recorded all our conversations and threats.
Huh?
I'll take this to a lawyer and proceed with the divorce properly.
Hey, what about the house?
He panicked, asking about the house. I replied firmly. I wanted to live in this house with you and Liam. But clearly, you had other plans. If you want to live with your parents so badly, go ahead. Oh, and when we divorce, make sure to repay the $30,000 I lent for the down payment. And lump sum child support too. I'll be raising Liam. With that, I opened a box containing essential items for my son and me, a traveling bag and a backpack, for whatever comes next. Yes, I had been waiting for this moment. As I suspected, my in-laws had intentions of taking over the house. And my husband, too, conspired with them to deceive me. In that case, divorce seemed to be my only option. However, my husband, born into a family that values appearances, wouldn't readily agree to a divorce. So, I came up with a plan involving the divorce papers he had prepared. Although he probably intended it as an empty threat, he had meticulously filled out the divorce form. I decided to play along. But submitting it silently risked invalidating the divorce, so I secretly recorded our conversations to confirm his genuine intent. Perhaps my husband believed I lacked the courage to go through with it. True, divorcing while raising our young son wouldn't be easy. But I wasn't alone. My parents supported me, and most importantly, I worried about our son's well-being if we continued living with that family. So, divorce and separation seemed like the best course of action. I packed my bags and went to my parents' home, explaining the situation. They assured me, "You're welcome to stay here." Then, I entrusted my son to them and visited a lawyer's office. I showed them the divorce papers, the recorded conversations, and requested legal proceedings. A week after leaving our newly built home, my husband called repeatedly. Avoiding his calls, I let the answering machine collect numerous messages. His voicemails consisted of demands about the mortgage.
What are you thinking? Come back soon.
Yet there were no apologies, no concern for our son, and no mention of driving out my in-laws. My husband has no intention of kicking out his parents after all that has happened. He is only worried about the mortgage. Of course, there's a reason for that. My husband doesn't have any savings. You see, he spends money on his hobbies like casinos and horse racing. Despite initially promising to save before building the house, all we have was my pre-marriage savings of $30,000. When I confronted him about it, he nonchalantly said,
Oops, my bad. If I put the mortgage in my name, it'll be fine.
But I couldn't tolerate his carefree attitude, so I made him sign a loan agreement. It was a formality because he had borrowed $30,000 from me, and I wanted proper repayment. Although he underestimated the seriousness of financial transactions between spouses, he eventually complied. Little did I know that this precautionary document would come in handy. When we applied for the mortgage, we used my savings as the down payment, but the loan was in his name. However, I suspect he was counting on my income too. Perhaps he planned to burden me with all the living expenses after inviting his parents. Given how frugal my in-laws are, I doubt they'd contribute anything toward daily costs. I just want to make sure that I receive the money I lent and the child support in full. I had no intention of speaking to that family anymore, so I entrusted all the legal proceedings to a lawyer. Of course, I showed them the loan agreement my husband had signed, and I fully intend to collect what's owed. Honestly, I was prepared for his request to split child support payments. However, my prideful in-laws insisted on paying it all at once, saying they wanted to sever ties with such a dreadful daughter-in-law. But how could they manage that without any savings? They probably borrowed from some shady source at exorbitant interest rates. Well, that's none of my concern. In the days that followed, I learned that my husband's family decided not to live in the newly built house and put it up for sale. Perhaps they found it difficult to keep up with the mortgage payments after I left. And there's the matter of their suspicious debts too. As it turns out, my husband and in-laws, who are strapped for cash, are now renting a small apartment. Despite finally acquiring a fancy kitchen, my mother-in-law won't get much use out of it. She's too short for the height I customized. Furthermore, my divorced sister-in-law and her kids have returned to her parents' home. She's been a stay-at-home mom for years and has no intention of working. Her children, a middle schooler and an elementary schooler, will now squeeze into that cramped space. Their living expenses rely solely on my ex-husband's earnings and his parents' pension. But with my husband drowning in debt, there's no room for flexibility. According to rumors, it seems that my ex-in-laws are constantly arguing due to the increased family size, and the noise has become a nuisance for the neighbors. My ex-sister-in-law expressed frustration, saying,
I heard we could live in the new house. So why is this happening?
I wanted to use the modern kitchen and live in the new house.
If you keep complaining, I'll hit the jackpot and buy anything, even a house.
Unfortunately, it appears he's delved deeper into his long-standing gambling hobby and accumulated more debt. There are whispers that he might have even borrowed from shadier sources. It's a pitiable situation. However, considering my ex-husband's unwavering support for his parents, he's reaping what he sowed. As for me, I now live in a rental apartment near my workplace with my son. When I work late, my parents support my son, which puts my mind at ease. Over time, I've been promoted, and my salary has increased. I'm saving up the extra income to treat my son and parents to a relaxing stay at a high-end hotel. Unlike someone else, I'll express my gratitude to the parents who've always supported me while finding happiness.
How did you find this story? Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Until next time in the next video.